Hey everyone, it's Nick Marzinski at TrappingLight.com. In my last tutorial I said I was going to talk about layer styles today, and I misspoke. I'm actually going to be talking about blend modes today. See, in the last few tutorials I've introduced the concept of layers and then explained how layers can be selectively hidden using layer masks. However, what blend modes are designed to do is something a little bit more interesting in that they determine how one layer on top actually interacts with the layers below it, because changing how these layers can interact with one another allows you to make some very sophisticated and at the same time non-destructive changes to your image. So that's what I want to spend this time talking about in future tutorials as well, because with blend modes there's really a lot of stuff you can do and they're pretty cool. So let's get started. Now, in order to start off, I'm just going to be using this reference image, and let's talk about reference images for a bit. A lot of times when I'm trying to figure out how something works in Photoshop, I end up building a file that's designed to just simply let me experiment, and it's very, very plain. In the case of this file, I've got two layers. I've got a base layer, which is just purple on the bottom. You can see that in my layers palette, and then above it I've got another layer which I'm calling a blend layer, which I've named blend layer, and it's just black, 50% gray and white. And it's a really simple image, but the great thing about it is that I can pinpoint exactly how something is working. See, if you do your experimenting on an actual photograph, it's sometimes difficult because you can get sidetracked with looking at the edit and deciding, is this actually making my image look better? So there's the aesthetics of it that you're thinking about. Not to mention, photographic images are generally fairly complicated. They're filled with lots of details. They can have different tones and colors, and that can affect how you perceive what Photoshop is doing. And so by building and using this simple reference image, I have a lot of control over testing how edits work in Photoshop, and then it removes the issues of aesthetics completely. I don't need to think about, is this edit making my image look any better? I'm just concentrated on the mechanics of what's actually happening. Okay? Now, with any experimenting that I like to do, I want to do some measuring, and so in order to do that, I'm going to grab my color sampler tool over here, and this is a tool that's only available in Photoshop, Creative Suite, or Creative Cloud. If you're using Photoshop Elements, you don't have it. And basically all it does is it allows you to create or pinpoint different samples in your different colors in your image and see what they are and how they stack up. So I'm going to just hit a point on the black, hit a point on the 50% gray, and hit a point on the white. And in my info palette, you can see my number 1 point, which is this black one, has an RGB value of 000. The number 3 point, which is white here, has a RGB value of 255, 255, 255. So this is the minimum on black. This is the maximum on white. And then this 50% gray obviously has a value here between the two of 128, 128, 128. The other thing I'm also going to do while I'm doing this is that I'm going to select the top of this layer here, and I'm going to add a layer mask. And what that'll do is because I've selected it, it puts that as white on the layer mask, and then the rest of the image that's not selected is black. So then you can see this base layer of purple. So I'm going to switch back to my color picker tool or color sample tool, and then I'm going to also place a 4th point on the purple. And what you can see is that the purple here, which is point number 4, has an RGB value of 102, 45, and 145. So clearly it's biased towards the blue with a little bit of red and then not very much green at all. Okay? So right now with this black, gray, white layer, my blend mode is set to normal. Okay? You can see this normal right here in the layers palette. And normal is the default blend mode. When you set up a new layer, whether it's a regular layer, whether it's adjustment layer, a shape layer, it doesn't matter. Your blend mode is always going to be set to normal. And normal is basically what you see is what you get. Okay? This blend layer here has an opacity of 100%, so it's hiding the layer that's below it. The only reason why you see this part right on the bottom is because I've created this layer mask there. Okay? So this is normal blend mode. It's the one that everybody's familiar with, and what I want to do right now is to try a different blend mode. So I'm going to click on this drop down, and it's going to come up with a whole bunch of different blend modes. And even if you're in Photoshop Elements, you're not going to have all of these, you'll have most of them, and it's kind of like, wow, this is way too many blend modes. Which ones do I choose? Well, today I'm only going to be taking a look at two of them, and that's multiply, which is up here, and screen, which is which is below it. Okay, so first off, I'm going to select multiply, and here's what happens. So let's take a look at it, and let's think about it from looking at what's actually happening here in the image, but also what's happening here on the info palette. What we can see is that the black right here has stayed exactly the same. It still has the RGB value of 000. Okay. On the other hand, this white, this area here that used to be white, that was 255, 255, and 255, now has taken on the same shade as the purple. And this 50% gray that we've got right here has, well, it's not gray anymore, but it's taken on some of the purple, but it's dark in the purple. This purple that's here in what is 50% gray on the blend layer is darker than the regular purple that we see that over here where it was white, and on the bottom where it's masked to purple. So what does that tell us? Well, what it says is that the multiply blend mode has no effect whatsoever when there's black on the blend layer. Also, if the blend layer contains white, then that white portion of this blend layer here is going to completely disappear. However, if it's a shade between white and black, then the blend layer is going to basically darken the base layer. So that's interesting and kind of complicated, but how can I actually use this in an image? Okay, let's move to a different image right here. And what I've got a picture of a waterfall, and you can see that it was taken in the middle of winter because there's snow all over everything. And let's say that I want to darken this image. Now I can, select something like levels and go drag my black point over here, and that's going to darken everything. But it's just, I can do it that way, but it gives me kind of, it can be hard to work with, and it can sometimes not necessarily get you where you want to go. Well, another way that I can darken my image is to actually copy it by pressing Control and J or Command and J. And then on this top layer here, I can change the blend mode to multiply. And obviously, and the image is darkened, And the nice thing about doing it this way is that, remember when I said that whites don't get affected very much when the when the blend mode is set to multiply. If we go back to this image here, the white here completely disappears. Well, in this image that I'm working with, I've got a lot of whites. I've got white on the snow here, white over here. There's a little bit of white, maybe some gray in the waterfall. And when I hit this blend mode, when I hit the second layer and change the blend mode to multiply, the snow doesn't really change all that much, but some of the areas around it makes this water very interesting and very dark, and introduces a lot of interesting contrast here. If it's too severe, I can just simply make sure that my top layer is selected and take this opacity down just a bit to maybe right about there. But just by making a copy of my image and changing the blend mode of this, it introduces a lot of interesting contrast that I don't have in the original image. So that's one way that you can use the multiply blend mode. Let's look at another way though. Here I've got an image of a film strip, okay, and it's a black film strip on a white background, but it's unfortunately one layer. It doesn't exist as multiple layers. The film strip isn't its own layer. So let's say that I want to introduce some sort of film strip graphic into this image. Well, I can just simply grab the film strip here and grab this layer and drag it right onto the image. And there I've got my film strip on there. I'm going to switch to my move tool by pressing V, move my film strip around, and maybe make it a little slanted like that. Okay, so now I've got a film strip graphic on here, but the problem is that all I want to see is the film strip. I don't want to see all this white, okay? Well, there's a few different ways that you can do it. You could try and select all this white using a selection tool like a Lasso Tool. I'll apply the transformation like a Lasso Tool and then blend it, or do some really complicated brush work or something like that. But if we know how blend modes work, we don't have to do any of that. And there we go. We don't have to do any of that, because what I can do if I know that I want to get the white out of there, is I can just simply click on the layer that I want to blend it with and go over to multiply right here. And the white disappears. Remember, again, it's just like our example image. When we had the white over here, but we switched the blend mode to multiply, the white disappears, but the black stays the same. In this case, with the film strip is black, the background is white, and so when we switch the blend mode to multiply, the film strip remains, but the background completely disappears. And so if you're ever working with a white background in an image or a composite or something and you want to get rid of it, one of the easiest ways to do that is to simply use the multiply blend mode on that layer, and the white background will disappear completely. Now, what could I do with this? Let's say that I'll select this layer here, and I'm going to add an invert like that, which makes everything look like a negative. And actually, you know what? I'm not even going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to create a lasso right here, filling in that, just like that. And so now I've selected that area. I'm going to select layer 1, just like I've done, and I'm going to go to invert now. And just like that, we have a case where now this image in the film strip has been inverted, and it's only confined to that because of the layer mask that I just placed on it. So this is one interesting way that you can use multiply to make changes to your image. Now that that's done, let's look at a different blend mode. In this case, now I want to look at screen. So multiply makes everything darker, makes the whites disappear, and keeps blacks. Screen does the exact opposite. In this case, when I changed it to screen, it keeps the white the way it is. The black completely disappears, and so we can see that it's all purple here. And the 50% gray makes the underlying base layer, the purple, lighter. Okay? So again, it's kind of interesting, but how can that be used in an image? Well, here I've got another image that I took, and this is a case where the image is clearly a bit underexposed. Now, one of the ways that I can deal with that is to simply make a copy of this layer by pressing Ctrl J. So I've got my new copy right here, and now I can change the blend mode to screen. And what that does immediately is it brightens up the image. If I think it's too bright, I can just simply take the opacity down just a little bit. Okay? Well, what other ways can I use it? Well, right now there's kind of this, I don't know if you want to call it, fad of creating retro-looking images, things that look like they were taken with an analog camera. Well, you know, one of the things that you can do is you can add light leaks to an image. Well, if you understand how the screen blend mode works, where it makes everything lighter, then doing that sort of thing is actually fairly easy. In this case, what I'll do is I'll add a new layer, and I'll grab my brush tool, and I'll make sure that it's nice and big and the hardness is set to 0. And then I'll grab some kind of, say, light yellow color, and I'll just paint it on the sides of my image right here. And maybe just a little bit down there. And then maybe I'll change it up and I'll take just a light bit of red and introduce some there, and maybe a little bit there, and some right there as well. Okay? Now, right now my layer blend mode is set to normal. It doesn't look that great, but when I set it to screen, all of a sudden the kind of effect that I get, and maybe dial the opacity of this light leak layer down just a little bit, all of a sudden this effect that I'm getting is very reminiscent of the kind of light leak that you would get if you were using an analog camera and you actually had some area where light was getting into to partially expose the film. So those are some of the effects that you can use with blend modes. They're very, very powerful, and I encourage you to actually, if you're not familiar with them at all, take a look at them and really think about, experiment with them, play around with them, see how they work, and see how you can use them within your own image. There's one final thing before I go that I want to call your attention to, and that's if we open this drop down menu here, what we can see is that these blend modes are grouped in certain ways. So you can see the multiply blend mode is in this area here. It's got darken, it's got color burn, it's got linear burn, and darker color. Okay, and the screen blend mode is grouped into this other one, which has things like lighten and color dodge and linear dodge and lighter color. Okay, and a lot of the blend modes are in these specific groups for a good reason. Adobe did this for a very good reason. And in the case of multiply, all of the blend modes here are designed to create a darkening effect on an image. And so all of these blend modes can be used to darken an image. In the same way, the screen blend mode and all of the ones around it can be used to brighten an image. And so they'll produce some sort of brightening effect. And so I encourage you to create additional layers on your image and play around with blend modes to get a sense of how they work and how you can use them in your own images. And the next time I'm going to be going into some of the more of the blend modes in some of these other groups. Okay? In the meantime, if you're not familiar with blend modes, by all means play around with them. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something from it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section either on YouTube or on my site. My name is Nick Marzinski with trappinglight.com. Thanks for watching.